Also, more good news for the Democrats as it appears that the Dobbs decision on abortion is having a serious effect on the elections. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So the big news in last Tuesday's election was the result in the 19th District of New York. There was a special election there. And pretty consistently, we've seen that special elections tend to kind of give you some kind of a preview of what's going to happen in a midterm election. I mean, we have to remember how the special elections in 2017 and early 2018 indicated Democratic strength as we were going into the 2018 midterm, which of course is when the Democrats won the House by a substantial margin. And frankly, prior to the Dobbs decision, most of the indicators were not very favorable for the Democrats. In fact, generally speaking, it appeared that the Republicans were running ahead of where they had run in the 2020 election, something they obviously need to do if they're going to be able to win the House. Now, though, things have changed. And the special election in the 19th District of New York is the most glaring example of that. This was a race Mark Molinaro, the Republican, was supposed to win. He's a well-known candidate in a district that barely voted for President Biden. So this is exactly the type of district that, if the margin had shifted towards Republicans, should basically be an easy Republican win. But as it turns out, Democrat Pat Ryan won the race with 52% of the vote in a real shocker, with high turnout from the Democratic areas, just demonstrating once again that Democratic voters are energized by the Dobbs decision. They realize, finally, frankly, that abortion is a critical election issue and they need to do something about it. In fact, this race was just one of 5 special elections held since the Dobbs decision. And in every single one, at least in 4 of them, because the 5th we're still waiting on final results there, although it looks like that's going to be the case there as well. But in all of them, the Democrats have strongly outperformed President Biden, showing again that there's new energy among the Democrats after that decision. These indicators are supported by recent polling data. For example, a recent Pew poll found that 71% of Democrats rank abortion as a very important issue. That's in contrast to 46% of Democrats in March, and compared with about 40% of Republicans right now. And of course, we know about the vote in Kansas and what a shocker that was. But what makes the 19th district especially interesting to look at is the fact that these two candidates, aside from the fact that the Republican was favored, but they ran basically the kind of campaigns that we're expecting to see each party running this fall. On the Republican side, Molinaro ran a campaign attacking President Biden and talking about inflation and trying to downplay abortion. Ryan's campaign, of course, emphasized the fact that abortion was on the ballot. In fact, his sign said, "Choice is on the ballot." So the message could not have been any more clear, which is if you're concerned about abortion rights, you need to come out and vote for the Democrat. And Democrats are getting that message. In fact, for the first time since late last year, the Democrats now have an edge in the generic ballot. What the generic ballot is when polls are done and they just ask, would you rather see the Democrat or the Republican representing you in Congress? Generally speaking, these are a good indication of where the voters are going to put their preference without regard for the individual qualities of the candidates. Well, again, this is the first time since last year that Democrats have taken a lead in that measure. As a result of these changes, the polling website 538 has changed their predictions, and you have to check these out. For the first time this year, the Democrats are actually favored by a pretty substantial margin to keep control of the Senate, by 64%. And almost more amazing is the fact, if you kind of scroll down here a little bit, that now the Democrats are given a 22% chance of holding on to the House. Now that might seem pretty grim, but the fact of the matter is that's a huge improvement over where it was in the past. As recently as a few days ago, Democrats were given a 13% chance of holding on to the House, and that was an improvement. This data is really shocking because according to many of the fundamentals, one would expect the Republicans to really dominate in this upcoming election. After all, President Biden's approval rating remains in the low 40s. Now, interestingly enough, the last time a Democratic president had an approval rating in that area coming up to a midterm election was when Jimmy Carter was in office. And actually, the Democrats held on to the House in that midterm. But what changed things was in September, Carter was able to help negotiate the Camp David Accords, which brought some peace to the Middle East. That foreign policy triumph helped improve his favorability rating up to about 50%. Now, could you imagine there being a foreign policy triumph that could improve President Biden's rating? Might there be the possibility of some success in Ukraine, maybe? And as the price of gas continues to come down and inflation continues to moderate, people are feeling slightly less upset about inflation and are willing to pay attention to some of their other concerns, like abortion, for example. The second thing to bear in mind is that in midterm elections, the party in power generally loses seats. I once heard that described as one of the few fundamental rules that exist in politics. So if Democrats are able to escape this by holding on to the Senate, maybe even increasing their margin there, and at a minimum, limiting their losses in the House, and maybe even holding on to it, that would be a huge repudiation of the Republicans by the American people. And frankly, with a couple extra seats in the Senate, it would give us the opportunity to pass some of the legislation regarding voter rights and the Build Back Better bill and labor reform, other things that have passed the House but have gone to the Senate to die because of the fact that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have refused to change the filibuster rule. Well, if the Democrats pick up at least 2 more seats in the Senate, then suddenly Manchin and Sinema become irrelevant. And we might actually have the chance to pass some of this important legislation. Does this mean we can rest on our laurels? Certainly not. Again, the fundamentals still favor the Republicans. Nevertheless, it should give us all hope and motivate us to get out there and organize and get people to vote. Because if we do, we might actually have some news to celebrate in November. Fingers crossed. Well, if you want to see some of the items that I'd like to see Congress pass, if we are able to expand our majority in the Senate and hold on to the House, check out this video I did over here regarding my Christmas list last Christmas. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.